Great. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the webinar today. We're going to continue talking about the power and control wheel we've been on for the last few weeks, and we've got a handful of weeks ahead of us. Normally, I've been looking at kind of two aspects at a time. We're just going to focus on one aspect today because number one, I think it's really, really important, and number two, I think it often gets really overlooked in marriages, especially in relationships that are struggling, because it's easy to lose track of this one in favor of things that feel more urgent, maybe even squawk a little louder than this. So we're going to talk about kids, where kids get caught in the crosshairs, either of domestically violent relationships or just relationship strain. So I'll start with the standard disclaimer on this because it can't be said enough. Domestic violence is by definition violent. There is hands-on harm done. So one incident is all it takes to shatter the safety of the relationship, and continued violent action is not needed in order to reinforce the fear and the subjugation and the power differential that comes with violence being part of a relationship. That being said, a lot of the couples that I work with, especially where there's addiction involved, they can display a lot of these aspects of domestic violence even when there's not hands-on offense. So the question I would encourage you to ponder in the back of your mind as you listen to this, rather than looking at this and saying, well, I've never laid a hand on my partner, I haven't become violent, this doesn't apply to me. We're going to look at this from a relationship culture standpoint. And if you are practicing things or you are not checking things that are part of violent relationship culture, I want you to ask yourself, why am I okay with this? Why am I allowing this to be part of my relationship culture, whether it's something that I give or something that I receive? I'll note here too, my opinion when there's problems, even serious problems like this in a relationship, is not the default, well, you got to get out. That's why I invite you to ponder what's going on and why am I allowing this to continue? So one more thing, those of you who are in recovery from your own addictions, you understand, or are going to understand soon, that simply not doing something does not a solid recovery make. So keep in mind when we're healing from addiction, we're getting our lives in order. It's not just a matter of abstaining from that which is harmful. It's also starting behavior that is helpful. I've been taking some training in marriage therapy, and we've put a focus on instances where there's infidelity or betrayal. And I love what the trainer said. He said, you can say this to the couples who come and see you, that if you'll stick with this process, I can promise you won't just get a relationship that is back to where it was before the bottom fell out. You'll get a relationship that is what it should have been all along. You'll get something better. And that's my hope as we look at these different aspects of impact of domestic violence, that you get some insight and you get some help to build something better than what you had before. Again, we're not just interested in stopping, we're interested in you getting the relationship that you should have had all along. And if that can be with the partner that you've been to hell and back with, great. So without further ado, let's talk about children as part of the collateral damage of either domestic violence or strain in a marriage. So we're going to start with the perspective of the kid, because I would probably say 80 to 90% of the time that I have couples who are struggling, I ask them about their kids and how they're doing as the couple is struggling. 80 to 90% of the time, these couples will say, our kids don't know anything about what's going on, they're fine. or some version of that. I think that is a really big oversight. So let's consider these relationships from the perspective of a child. So kids are small and they're helpless, and kids are also prone to put up with a lot of weirdness in order to preserve their connection to a person who is bigger than they are, to put it simply. Kids have a recognition that they are ultimately helpless. It's really funny. My 5-month-old daughter, she's starting to get mobile and to show us, what she wants. And this morning, after I fed her her breakfast, I had her on my lap, and we were sitting by her saucer, those saucers with the toys around. She really likes the saucer for short periods of time, and she started lunging towards it, which I think is so cute. I really want this. I'm excited about it. She would lunge, and then she would look at me with this look of distress on her face, like, when are you going to do something about this? So even with small kids, when they're in the act of self-activating, they also intuitively know that they can't get there by themselves. And there's this constant looking towards parents. What are you going to do about this? How are you going to help me? So kids live with that embodied realization that without somebody who is bigger than them, that can handle more complicated things than them, they're sunk. Quite literally, they're dead, if they don't have that help from somebody who's bigger. So there is an inherent dependency, and that's not a bad thing. That's the way that relationship should work. And things that we are dependent on, we tend to get hyper attuned to, because we have to know what we're dealing with. I've shared this before when I've talked with folks about enmeshment. Part of my after school ritual was to go up to my mother's bedroom and to check. She usually took a nap in the afternoon while her 6 kids were gone at school, which I totally would have too. But I'd go to check to see if she'd gotten dressed for the day or if she was still in her pajamas. There wasn't a thing I could do about it, but it told me what to expect for the rest of the day. If she was in her pajamas, I knew we were on our own until my dad got home from work. If she'd been dressed for the day, she was probably going to come downstairs and there was going to be some kind of interaction. Kids hyper attune to the emotional states of their parents. And I never had to ask her, how are you feeling today? Because I knew what the signs were. I knew what the signals were. Kids don't have to intellectually understand to know what's going on. So if you have it in your head that, we never fight in front of the kids, or the kids don't know what any of this means, they're fine, put that out of your head, because it's not true. Kids are little stress sponges. They have to be. They have to absorb what's going on with their parents. Number one, they're too small to stop that from happening. And number two, they're completely dependent on their parents, on their caregivers for their well-being. So they're entwined. If it's happening within you, it's happening within your kids too. And I don't mean to put that out there and have anyone take it to an extreme and say, oh my gosh, I'm harming my kids by feeling bad. Don't mistake me there at all. I do want you to be very, very aware, though, that there is no hiding things from your kids, especially when it comes to emotions and stress. So in that respect, it is the duty of both parents to protect, nurture, and guide their children. Sometimes our duty is to protect our children from one another. An example, yesterday morning, most of the time our routine in getting my older kids off to school is, it runs pretty smooth. But yesterday morning, my son comes upstairs with his shoes in his hands and he says, the things that go inside my shoes are gone. His insoles were gone. And if you've raised small kids, you have head scratchers like this all the time. And so I said, what happened to the insoles? And he says, I don't know. That's the problem. I can't find them. And I'm sitting there thinking like, well, my insoles never go missing. That seems like a pretty, peanut butter and jelly type thing. They always go together. And so I'm looking at the clock and, we got to get teeth brushed and get breakfast eaten and, get everybody ready for school. So I'm getting more stressed and I start ranting. Not a proud moment for me. I said, this is as crazy to me as someone who leaves their underwear in the locker room at the pool. How do you not realize you're not wearing your underwear? This seems simple. And in the background, I hear my wife saying, "You're not helping anything. You're not helping anything." And of course, I'm not yielding, because I'm in my righteous anger. And eventually she comes and she stands in front of me and she says, "Stop right now. You're not helping anything." Message received. Sometimes it is our duty to protect our children from our partner. Now, there's different degrees of that. Sometimes it's, like I'm describing there, I did not have my emotions in check. I was not mindful of what was happening to the little people around me. And I needed to check. There's other times where there is actual abuse going on. There's times where there is definitive, intense harm that is happening to a child. I see very often, especially in couples that I've worked with or individuals that I work with where divorce is happening, this threat of "you're bad for our children" hangs over the head. What I would say about that is, if there is actual threat to your children, if you think your partner is abusing your children, you have a duty to call the authorities on that. Not to threaten your partner with "I will expose you." That's using your kids as a pawn. That's using your kids as leverage over your partner. If you think there's actual harm being done, the law across the country is adults are responsible to report any suspected abuse of a child. We're all responsible for it. So if you suspect that's going on, step up to the plate and do your duty, and get that child help from somebody who can come in and definitively protect them from a harmful adult. If it's not at that level, or you are not ready to follow through on that, stop the threatening. That may be it may be a sign that there's an issue for you to deal with your partner. It could be, or your soon-to-be ex-partner. I don't agree with your parenting approach. That's a mom and dad issue. That's not a kids as a pawn issue. I'm worried about the safety of your space here. I don't think we can leave knives and guns out with our kids. That's an issue to deal with your partner. A lot of times, I would say kids get caught in the crosshairs because the adults on the scene are not willing to deal with what they have to deal with each other. They don't want to be grown-ups. As I say that, again, please keep in mind, I know it's not always that simple. That's a bit of a one-dimensional view of problems here. But when it comes to normal back and forth and the way that kids get caught in the crosshairs, make sure you're dealing with your partner. When it is in the realm of abuse and harm to a child and things that are reportable, and kids actually need to be removed from the home, or I shouldn't say kids be removed from the home, but you may need to remove yourself and your children from the home in order to get safe. If you're in that situation, you're wondering about it, it's a very hard decision to make. It's a very difficult process to go through. When I've helped people with this before, there's often a long process of gathering information. One of the biggest downsides of needing to leave a home or a partnership where there is abuse of children going on is where are we going to go, and are my kids going to be safe? Your standard emergency shelters or your standard homeless shelters are not great places for kids. I'd say they're not great places for anyone who's there. It's not a place people go if they can avoid it. But there are some specific family shelters, some specific domestic violence shelters. And if you're in one of these situations, it might be good for you to learn about resources in your area. These shelters are set up to be safe places, safe and secure and nurturing places for primarily mothers and children who have untenable and abusive situations at home. Learn about the resources. You may not be ready to leave or pull the trigger right away if you need to, but keep it in your back pocket and know that there are options open to you. And in these shelters too, it's not just a place to stay while you bide your time. There's a lot of help. There's counseling. There can be legal help. There can be law enforcement help. There are options for getting safe. So know what those are. Another part about kids getting caught in the middle, and this can be really, really difficult for the, I would say the non-offending parent, or I would say the non-violent parent. It can be really difficult. Your kids will form an opinion about both of you, and the opinion may not make total sense. For example, several years ago when I got licensed as a foster parent, one of the things they brought up is to be prepared when kids come into your home, that their parents may have legitimately put them through some really, really horrendous things, and they may still have a lot of loyalty towards their parents. Again, keep in mind, for a little kid, mom and dad or parents are the universe to them. Even when you hurt me extremely, I'll miss you. I'll want you. I'll long to be comforted by you. So it may not make sense that a parent who is yelling and angry and scary, your child may miss them, may ask about them, may want to be with them. Hold space for that kid. Work to understand where that comes from and why, and don't try to fix it. That's some of that attachment stuff, that's some of that longing, for acceptance and safety that the kids got to go through. They may also have an opinion about you as the, non-violent parent. They may be angry with you. Through no fault of your own, you may have had to expend a lot of emotional energy just to keep everyone's head above water. And your kids may feel the lack of your emotional presence, and they may tell you so. Again, it's really, really difficult to hear, but if you remember your duty towards your children, to be the one who's bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind, hear them out. Ask them what they mean by that. Ask them when they experience it. Kids hurt in situations like this. Again, even if they don't cognitively understand what's going on, they're registering everything. And part of the resilience factor is not just, to have them put on a stiff upper lip and get through it, but to be with people who are familiar, to be with people who understand them emotionally. This was really interesting research that came out of the London Blitz in World War II. It was right after the end of World War II that researchers started studying attachment, people like John Bowlby. And one thing that they noticed, there was a big program where, families who had means, they would send their children to go live in the countryside with family if they could. There were a lot of strangers also who took in children to keep them out of London that was being bombed nightly. Some families didn't have this option or didn't want to send their kids out, and there were kids who lived through nightly bombings in London and surrounding areas proper. And what they found afterward is that the kids who stayed with their familiar caregivers had less symptoms of PTSD than the kids who went and lived in the country and never saw or heard a bomb drop. And the thing that points to is there's a quality of attunement no matter what's going on around you. When caregivers can attune, when caregivers can go through with a child the horrific things that are going on around them, that kid will fare better. And it's not just about being there in body. That does make a really big difference, but also being there in emotion. Meet the child where they're at emotionally. It's very, very difficult to do because when you're the parent in this situation, you're going through plenty of your own stuff. And I guess my plea here, my challenge here would be to, if you find yourself saying, my kids are okay, they don't know what's going on, to challenge that a bit, to rethink that one, to think about what you absorbed as a child in your home, maybe not knowing explicitly what was going on, but absorbing the energy around you. Your kids are no different. And part of how that abuse cycle stops is at least one parent, turns the light on and gets refocused on that child or those children, even when it's really difficult, even when it's really chaotic. So that is children being caught in the middle in relationships, in domestically violent relationship culture.
Thank you, John. That is one of our more depressing topics, but it's just
a
horrible.
little heavy.
Yeah, I want to share my screen for just a second. I want to show everybody the power and control wheel, just so they all know what we're talking about. So this is the power and control wheel, and we're kind of in this using children corner. Or I actually looked this up. You came up with semi-quadrant, and there was a word for it, and I have now forgotten the word. I'm so embarrassed that I looked it up and I can't remember. So anyway, this is a power control wheel. I keep it on my desktop. You can Google it and get a copy if you want, or you can email me and I'll just send you this one. Anybody who wants it, just scott@seekingintegrity.com. Type your questions into the Q&A. We've got one already, but I have a couple questions for you. First of all, comparing the insoles going missing to getting dressed at the pool without putting your underwear on. I'm just wondering where that came from. Did someone actually do that?
Well, I used to swim for exercise most mornings. The high school pool's just down the street, yeah. And without fail, I was not the first person there, but without fail, like 3 times a week, there's a pair of underwear just left at the pool, and I'm thinking, did you bring multiple pairs here? Like, did you not realize? Yeah. So
I was wondering where that one came from. So kids, not only are they aware, they tend to internalize and blame themselves, don't they?
Yeah. It's a bug of how their brains are oriented. They're what we call egocentric. They don't understand the world as there's an outside of me and an inside of me. It's all self-referential. An example is my oldest, when he was young, he liked to read in the car. And one day we're backing out of the driveway and he has a book open and he says, "Dad, what's this right here?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he points to the book and I said, "I don't know, I can't see it." So he holds the book up like this, still facing him. And he said, "This right here." That's how kids see the world. If I see it, if I feel it, everybody else does. It's happening to me. And it goes conversely. If you're feeling this, it must be about me. Their brains don't do me versus you very well yet. And I can't tell if I'm frozen or if Scott is frozen. If someone could put in the chat, can you hear me? Scott is frozen. Okay. All right. Well, we will get Scott back soon. So that's a good point. That Scott is bringing up, and something to keep in mind is that there's more at stake than just the kid is being stressed. The kid's identity starts from what's reflected in their environment. And whenever I talk about this stuff in my recovery groups, it gets pretty heavy, and there can be a lot of guilt that comes in. I'll just say it right at the outset. Every parent really messes this up. Sometimes to different degrees, or often to different degrees, but every parent messes this up. And the reason why I think it's critical to know about this now, and to have this information in your head, is because it helps with the repair. In my opinion, the ruptures don't matter as much if there is really, really good repair. And understanding what gets shifted, what gets broken for kids, can help with that repair. So again, recognizing that, maybe I was really angry a lot of the time when you were small. And there were good reasons. My spouse was actively betraying me on a regular basis, not in recovery. I was really stressed. I was really angry all the time. Just because there's a good reason for it doesn't lessen the impact on the child. And just because it's not something that you chose doesn't mean it's not something that you participated in. And you taking the helm and doing active repair with that child because of your impact on their life, it's phenomenally helpful in the resilience of that child and the coming together of that child later on. I'm of the opinion that everyone's going to get out of childhood with some scars, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think dealing with those scars is part of what makes us empathetic and aware adults.
I'm sorry, I missed all of that. I lost you after you were telling me about your son pointing at the book that you couldn't see. But I'm back, and I cannot see any questions that were in the Q&A feature, so you'll have to catch us up with that, John. But I have a couple questions. Like Bessel van der Kolk talks about a trauma that is processed right away, it kind of heals, whereas if we don't talk about things and we don't let our children know, it actually makes it worse. So from the standpoint of relationship problems between the parents, do we actually need to talk to the kids and let them know a little about what's going on?
Absolutely. And the actual time with which you do that, the literal time on the clock with which you do that makes all the difference. Stress that goes unattended for like 15 to 20 minutes, so distress that's not alleviated, it starts to go into long-term memory, and it's much harder to deal with stuff in long-term memory than it is in short-term memory. And that's due to the way that the brain is put together. Short-term memory is very malleable. Think about, I don't know, here's an example from my life. I hate roller coasters. And when I was in high school, I was in the band. We went to the Rose Parade and we did a day at Six Flags. And I thought, I'm going to end up sick, but I don't want to just, be lame and sit around Six Flags all day. So I rode every roller coaster I could until I'd thrown up so hard my body didn't work anymore. And in the beginning, the first few roller coasters I rode, they were actually really fun. It was terrifying to get on, and I was anticipating being sick. But in the end, I was less sick than I anticipated. And I was like, oh, I would do that again. Towards the end of the day, I was less scared to get on the roller coaster, but I was, sick as a dog afterward. And that wasn't such a good experience. And that colored what went in. So our short-term experience is malleable. And the note that we end on tends to be more of what colors the whole experience. So when there is misattunement, when there is rupture in a relationship with a kid, whether it's you and them, or it's you and your spouse, put them through stress, talk to them as fast as possible about what they witness, give them true reassurance. Mom and dad are having problems. This isn't about you. You're okay, you're good, you're loved. Mom and dad need to work this out. And if it's a chronic issue, I think it's very, very important to give the kids age appropriate context for what's going on. One of the things that helps with either repair of traumatic memory or preventing traumatic memory from happening in the first place is being able to have a beginning, middle, end narrative. So when kids are under stress, but there's awareness of what's going on, this is one of the reasons why the kids in London did better than the kids in the countryside, is because it was this, we're at war with Germany. Their planes come over every night. They drop bombs. We are going to, put our blackout curtains up. We're going to get in the bomb shelters. We'll wake up every morning. We'll clean up what we need to, and we'll get on with life. There's a narrative there. The kids in the countryside had no idea what was happening to their loved ones and their home and their playgrounds and schools. And the narrative ran wild. So I do think at every age and level of development, chronic stressors that parents are under, they need to be explained to the kids in an age appropriate way so that they can have buckets to put the information in.
Yeah, and kids really need that connection and nurture. The other studies that Bowlby and Ainsworth were doing then, a lot, the war orphans, they were sort of put into like little factories to be, fed on a schedule and changed on a schedule and burped on a schedule, but they didn't get a lot of nurturing. And what they found was a lot of these kids actually got sick and died, even though all of their physical needs were getting met. They weren't getting their emotional needs met. And then the kids who survived, they really struggled later in life. They couldn't hold jobs. They were addicts. They were alcoholics. because they didn't get that early nurturing. Kids really need that, and they need that sort of the reassurance and the emotional attunement from their parents. And when we don't get that, we struggle. And they, follow-up studies they did with rhesus monkeys, that, they give them a choice between a wire mother who has food, like a fake wire mother who has food, or a squashy ragdoll mom. And they go to the squashy ragdoll mom every time, even if they're starving. They want the squashy ragdoll because it's just, they need it. So yeah.
Comfort is a huge part of safety and development. You can even get, like you talk about the war orphans, you can get kids who fail to thrive, who are fed and changed on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Even so kids that are born addicted to drugs and, have to step off, there's a morphine protocol that up until recently, it was one of the most effective ways they knew to get kids to withdraw. They would, high levels of morphine in the beginning, and you titrate that over weeks. It could be sometimes a 6-8 week process for a newborn baby. They found babies who were held skin to skin as much as possible. They could, number one, cut down the level of morphine, the level of drug that was needed from the get-go. And those kids, they withdrew, they came off the drug far faster. Instead of 6 to 8 weeks, you'd be looking at 2 weeks and inside of 2 weeks. And the only difference is skin to skin contact, that comfort. It's not a drug, it's not nourishment, it's not, anything that you would think that would, or maybe, outrightly think this is what a kid needs to survive, but it's so important, that attunement, that softness, that I'm right here with you. Do you want to go to the Q&A?
I got one last question for you. You mentioned that sometimes we use kids as a weapon or pawn. How does that occur, and what impact does it have on the kids, and how can we undo that impact? That's like 7 questions.
Yeah. So how it occurs, I think, so I'll explain this part of it this way. There's a much bigger explanation, but keep in mind that as mammals, we're herd animals, and especially when we get in conflict, we want to know who's on our side. So two places this can happen. For a partner who is estranged, for a partner who is, pushed around by their other partner, they'll seek comfort with who's available. And, it's really easy in those situations. Your partner makes you very upset, hurts you. Mom or dad's being a jerk right now, and I'm really upset by it, saying to the kid. That kid now, you spent their childhood teaching them to be nice and, to play nice with friends and things like that. That kid now has this split allegiance. Mom or dad is hurt. Mom or dad caused this. And I have to pick sides. It can be as simple as that. Or in order to get leverage, I've seen with some more, I'll say sadistic parents, unfortunately, I've seen them literally put the kids in a position to cause pain to the other parent. It's a complete disregard for that duty that you have. If you brought a life into the world, you got to protect it. And if you're not going to protect it, get out of the way and let somebody else. It can be literally that leverage. And so there's a lot of mechanisms that put kids in the middle, and the kids will feel the strain. What was the second part to that, Scott?
How does it impact the kids, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, so the point that Scott brought up earlier, kids are egocentric. They see the whole world through them. So that strain, that caught in the middle, eventually kids will move from which parent is good and bad to when am I good and when am I bad. When parent A is happy with me, that's when I'm good. When parent B is mad at me, that's when I'm bad. And so it can make this really conditional acceptance, this conditional acceptability within the child. That really harms identity development. Instead of part of our duty as parents is to get out of the way with our own agenda and let our kids blossom as who they are, and to help them find appreciation for that, and acceptance for the parts of themselves that they may not like, but it is who they are. And but when we are, fighting our own battles so around the clock and we're not paying attention to them, we really neglect that. And in the absence of accurate information, kids' brains go to bizarre places. They put together a very scary world. So that's some of the impact. The way to deal with that is, again, like I said before, make sure that conflict between you and your spouse stays between you and your spouse. And that the kids know, again, give some of that context, give some of that understanding. Mom and dad are having a hard time right now. Work with that kid on, their sense of worth and value. And if you're going to tell them, you are worthwhile and this is not your problem, make sure you back that up in action too. You can't continue to do what you've been doing and just give them lip service. You have to back that up in action.
Yeah, I mean, and don't use your kids as message carriers. Don't use your kids as your sounding board. Your kid is not your partner. We talk about enmeshment all the time here, but
yeah. Joseph Campbell, it was I love this concept from him. It was a little depressing, but also kind of calling. He says when a parent brings a life into the world, that parent's life is now on the decline, and it must be bent in service of protecting this new little life. Much like trees in the forest, when they drop their seeds and start growing up, the main function of the adult tree is to protect the smaller tree as it develops a root system, get strength in its trunk. And what we'll see in forests is once the old growth dies, the protected new growth will shoot up really fast. It grows really strong. And again, that's Joseph Campbell talks about that as one of the duties of a parent, a caregiver, is you essentially shield your young until they're ready to face the world on their own.
Yeah, and in Ken Adams' word, the parent exists to meet the needs of the child, not vice versa. So,
yeah.
And when it goes wrong, it goes wrong. So yes, please go to the Q&A.
And don't get me wrong.
Monopolized.
It's very complicated because parents' problems don't stop when they have kids. So don't get me wrong. I understand this is hard and this is fraught, but there's a duty to vulnerable people that I believe us less vulnerable people have. So in the Q&A, I was a narcissistic abused child, and I wonder, can you help me understand? I know now I have a severe attachment trauma. It's hard to bond. It's hard to bond or let people in, but I did bond with my antisocial former partner. The more he pushed away, the more I panicked. Thank God I have the knowledge I have now, but how could I try to bond with him while I never did with anyone else? So keep in mind, no matter how horrific the trauma is you've been through, you're still a herd animal if you're a mammal. That's a drive in us we can't really get to go away. We can put fear and caution around it. But when push comes to shove, if there is any opportunity to be bonded with someone and our desperation is great enough, we'll take it. Keep in mind also that our concept of love does not come from a universal concept. It comes from what our parents gave us. My opinion is that kids will interpret whatever their parents give them as love, whether it's actually love or not. So it takes some learning often. I'll tell you, the vast majority of people that I work with, they are attracted to traits in their partner that were terrible parts of their parents. That's very natural. It happens. Nobody's sick or twisted because that happens. Part of coming into adulthood is recognizing, even though we may be attracted to something or may be familiar to us, it may not be good for us. And that's where we get to exercise some of those higher cortical functions in our brain, instead of just that pure drive for I need what I need and I need it now. We can get a little more picky. We can get a little more deliberate about that. So to recap, that attachment drive doesn't go away even when people are really scared of it. And often I'll say our romantic partners, we start with someone who's very, very much like our parents, and we move hopefully as we learn, we move to something that's more about what we need versus what's just familiar. The next Q&A: how does an essay who was the child wounded in a bad marriage between his parents, one parent was vilified, then dies many years later, reconcile his own feelings for the absent parent? Gosh, there's a lot in that. I would say to that, grief is complicated, and especially when it comes to parents, very rarely do I see, I was just working with a guy yesterday who objectively, I think most people would look at his parents and say they were terrible people. There's a part of him that even though he recognizes that and is angry at the abuse, he misses them. He longs for what could have been. He longs for what should have been. And both sides of that have to be looked at. Kids hold on to their parents just as much as parents hold on to their kids. And sometimes as kids, the way we hold on to our parents is that you owed this to me. This is what it should have been and it wasn't. And that, manifests as anger. There's also a side that we would hold on to, even with an objectively terrible parent. We would hold on to, I wanted a daddy, I wanted a mommy, I wanted someone who would be soft with me. So I would say the reconciliation doesn't come from coming down on one side or the other. It comes from accepting both sides of that relationship. To put it simply, it was complicated, and that's the nature of this. That's the truth of it. Reconciliation or healing may not look like I'm always in this camp now. It may look like I recognize that I move between these camps. Sometimes I'm really angry and sometimes I'm really sad, and it's all valid. Scott, do you have question 3 up there?
Yeah, I do, but I kind of wanted to share an experience of mine, which is kind of just what you talked about. When I came into recovery, I wanted somebody to blame, and my parents were convenient scapegoats. And even though they never poured alcohol down my throat or shoved porn in front of me, but they were wonderful scapegoats. And about a year into recovery, a year and a half into recovery, I had been working really hard on my mommy and daddy issues, mostly mommy issues. And I shared in a 12-step meeting, my parents are nice people. They would have been really good parents for someone else. And I thought I had come like a really long way when I said that. And some old timer poked me and said, they didn't sign up for you either. I was like, oh, great. Just reminding me that, I'm an adult. Basically, what he was saying was, you're an adult. Let it go. Live your life now. Your parents did the best they could. Let's get on with it. Which I thought was a really good bit of advice, but not easier said than done.
Absolutely. That reminds me a bit of a similar corner that I turned. Time was my mom she'd reach out a lot for reassurance. I was a good mom, right? One of my rounds of going back to therapy in adulthood, she asked me, are you back in therapy because of something that I did? And, I used to either answer in this, oh, no, this is about me, or I would answer from an angry place, yeah, I'm dealing with crap you gave me. And, part of the realization I had is, it's my garden now, and you may have put some seeds in there, but they're mine now, and I'm responsible for them. And that is part of moving along, is releasing your parents from any claim you might have had on them, and recognizing that the window has closed for what you might have gotten or might have needed, and sitting and pining for it or demanding it at some point becomes self-harming. It becomes counterproductive.
Okay, next question. How can you work to reconnect with your children who are older kids when you've been separated from them for some time? What is the safest way to reintegrate?
If they're, I'd say even younger kids too, I think the first step is to ask them, are you open to a relationship with me? And understanding that that's not an all or nothing proposition. Are you going to take all of me? But I think starting to ask them, what kind of relationship would you be open to right now? Can we start with something? Can we build something? And then keep in mind that again, whether they're adults now or older teenagers or whatever, your responsibility as the parent initially is to take what your kids have to give you. So they might have some grievances to express to you. I would say one of the markers that you're really ready to reconnect and reintegrate with your kids is you'd be willing to listen to some of their grievances or listen to all of them, and not necessarily try to fix or justify, but accept. We have feelings in our relationship that are less than ideal and less than easy, but they're real.
Yeah, not get defensive while you're hearing them. Just to say, okay, that's our starting point. Let's go from here.
Yeah, the only nurturing thing long term is reality, and relationships are full of a lot of crappy feelings. But it's real, and real relationship isn't about just feeling good about each other all the time. It's about being able to share what's real.
When I pop down to this, when I hear my neighbor, a woman, a single mother, almost daily shouting and screaming at her daughter, then the next morning I hear her saying goodbye when the daughter leaves for school, and she says, "I love you." For me, this is mind blowing. Don't these people have a conscience? I really wonder how she could sleep without feeling guilty. What is this dynamic that's going on, and what does it mean, and what is it? I mean, how is it abusive? Is it, what are we dealing with?
Yeah, from the state's perspective, I don't think that any child services worker would hear shouting and screaming and say, "Yep, that's abusive," because there's so much that goes into that. But this dynamic of I'm shouting and screaming at you, and the next day I'm saying I love you. When you talk about this conscience part, a lot of people live disconnected, especially from the least desirable parts of them. So it's not always a continuous story. A lot of times people are taught that the way we reconcile is just to do really, really good right now, not deal with the past. And I would also say from the outside, what makes you think this person doesn't feel guilty? Guilt is not always evident, and guilt is not always expressed as, outward shame and heaviness. Sometimes guilt is expressed by the wide swings in between. I would also say here, one of the definitions of family, which I love, is a group of people who you think you can do whatever you want with, and there's no consequences, because we're blood related. I think there's an opportunity in recovery to move beyond we're family to we can be so much more. We can actually take care of each other. We can actually, build a relationship or build something that people want to be a part of, not that they are just a part of because they were born into it. But that's not. I don't think that's something that anyone and everyone has naturally, and they lose it along the way. I think it's something that comes from maturing. I think it comes from dealing with your demons, and people are at really different parts of the journey on that. As a parent who has done this very thing, from the position I'm in right now, it really blows my mind to look back and say, I've done this. I know for a fact, the time that I was there was a story in my head that made sense. There was a story in my head that let me live with myself. And until I was blessed with an opportunity to confront reality at a deeper level.
And none of us gets through childhood unscathed. This sort of inconsistency, it happens in every home, whether we'd like to admit it or not. But yeah, when it's a regular pattern, I think, that can do some longer term damage for sure.
Yeah.
How does a parent's addiction impact a child, and what can be done to avoid those impacts? It's a very simple but very huge question.
Yeah, again, we could talk for hours about this, and I'll say, just simply, addiction turns a person inward. You can't be active in addiction and attuned in relationships. It just doesn't work that way, because your primary relationship is your internal stimulus, and whatever causes that internal stimulus. So it affects the child much in a similar way if you had a brain dead parent, or you had a parent who really wasn't there in the body. That kid is going to face a lot of aloneness. They're going to face a lot of kind of empty space, so to speak. And the thing that complicates it is the parent's body is there. We call it complicated grief. It's as if you've died, but you're still here, living and breathing. So to put it simply,
maybe having a parent in an iron lung or something, the child can look at that and go, there's something wrong with my parent. Whereas when the parent's an addict and withdrawing, the child immediately thinks there's something wrong with me, that the parent won't bond with me.
Yeah. Very, very well said. So to put it simply, there's the impact of addiction on a child. How do you help the kid, or how do you avoid this? Get into solid recovery. Get into the kind of recovery that infuses itself into all of your relationships. Not necessarily that you talk recovery with everybody, but that the principles of recovery guide your relationships, and bring those blessings of recovery to your kids as fast as possible. I would say for me, one of the things that my recovery taught me before I ever had kids, and that I made sure came to my relationship with my kids, is I'm sorry, and here's what I'm going to do better, and then do it, is worth its weight in gold. Those kind of principles: make amends fast, admit your shortcomings, make effective repair, recognize that you have an impact on the world, you don't know it all. Those are all types of things that really, really, help kids in general, but especially kids who have been through this. That's what repair is made of, it's your principles of recovery.
Okay, one more quick question. Is it normal for a 7-year-old boy to look up kissing? I assume this is on the internet, or is it possible they saw something on the parent's computer? Great question.
I mean, it's always possible that kids see things on the parent's computer. A kid who's interested in kissing at 7 years old, I think that sounds pretty developmentally appropriate.
Yeah. There's a movie out called Good Boys, and they're like running around trying to learn how to kiss, and it's pretty hilarious. I mean, it's kind of gross, but probably really inappropriate for kids that age, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's an age where kids start to recognize there's a difference between boys and girls. Some kids start puberty as early as age 8. Certainly kissing is ubiquitous in our culture. It's in cartoons, it's in movies. So a kid being interested in that and wondering, what is that? Not necessarily a sign they came across something they shouldn't have. Sounds pretty developmentally on target.
Yeah. I thought it was kind of cute, actually. So I'm laughing. I understand. I don't mean to minimize the fact that you're worried about your child, but I thought it was pretty funny. So yeah. Sorry. We're out of time. Jon, thank you. We will continue with the Power and Control Wheel, I assume, the second week of December. Again, everybody, we're off on Thanksgiving, so have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in December.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.